So we'll shift gears and just furthering that discussion. Actually, we're going to talk about how to make your class interactive, whether it's face to face. We had some good questions about the social distancing in the classroom, or online, hybrid, etc. And we have representatives from both graduate programs, both faculty teaching the graduate programs, and then Dr. Fowler also teaches with our undergraduates. So we've got Dr. Major and Dr. Fowler who will share with you.
Okay, and as Dr. Wilson said, I do work with both graduate and undergraduates. And when we went online in the spring, engagement was one of my major concerns. So I started trying out new things. And then this summer, I've done some work to try and enhance that a little more. But you know, the beginning of the semester, we deal with wanting to get to know our students. And typically my classes have between 20 and 25 students in each section. And so I was thinking through, how am I going to get to know my students? I'm a hybrid model, so half will be with me, half will be Zooming. So before the first class, I plan to send a Flipgrid prompt. You could do something like just briefly introduce yourself and tell us one interesting fact about you. Then my teaching assistant and I will create a scavenger hunt if we have time the first day to let people guess what interesting fact goes with who. The thing I like about that is the Flipgrid that you set up will still be there. So if you forget who a student is, you can go back and look at their video real quickly. And I'm going to talk fast so that I save plenty of time for Claire. With videos, a lot of times when we're face-to-face, we like to show a video in class and have a discussion while it's fresh with the students and get their raw emotions as they watch it. So you could always add that video to your Blackboard course, have the students watch it prior to class. And in the spring, I had them watch, for instance, one I had them watch was A Seat at the Table. It's an older video, but it's very relevant for the times we're in now. And while the emotion was still raw, I had them record a Flipgrid with their thoughts and feelings about it. And then when we met all together, we were able to have a rich discussion about that, because I had seen their Flipgrids and some were crying, and you know, there was a lot of raw emotion out there. So it really enhanced the discussion when we were face to face, or when we Zoomed, we weren't face to face. You can also flip the script, send articles, lecture notes, assign readings in advance, assign students to breakout groups on Zoom. They work with their group, prepare and lead a discussion on the material. Then when you have them all together Zooming, you just facilitate as they present and you fill in the gaps as they missed gaps. Teamwork, because I teach a science methods class, I needed my students engaged in inquiry. And I actually did this in China too, when I was teaching a class in China through Zoom this summer. But give them a task such as an inquiry-based science challenge. They all have the same materials in their homes, but they're in a breakout room in Zoom. They appoint one person to actually manipulate the materials, and they work together to tell the person how to assemble everything. Then they present when you pull them back out of the breakout rooms. One thing I found with Zoom breakout rooms is if you have a Google Doc, or you can use the interactive whiteboard in Zoom, give them a task, and in their breakout rooms, they're actually responding to prompts on the Google Docs or on the interactive whiteboard. And that really gives they're not just sitting and chit-chatting that way, because they have this document with these prompts in front of them that they're working to complete to share when we pull back together. One trick I learned, if you have them turn their cameras off during the breakout rooms and you turn your camera off, you can rotate in and out and pop in and say, oh, this is an interesting conversation. I discovered that it prevents them from being as nervous that you pop up in their breakout room. They don't know you're there until you speak. And so, you know, you hear some rich dialogue that way. Use your social media platforms. I was very successful with this by creating private Facebook groups. With pre-service teachers, I needed an opportunity for them to teach lessons. So I had them create lessons with things they had readily available in their homes. They recorded the lessons. we created a private Facebook group. One was Digital Learning 101, and I just recently created another one called Teacher Talk to help our interns who had their internship interrupted. But I invited veteran teachers and others interested in just teaching approaches we share in the platforms. My students presented their video lessons and got some feedback from practicing teachers. Some of the teachers were able, they asked permission to use their lessons with their elementary children. So it really has created actually an online PLC is what it has done. And Screencast-O-Matic is a good tool if you don't want, if they're submitting things on Blackboard and you want to record your feedback and highlight on their documents and talk over, this is a good point, but I would like for you to elaborate more on this area. You can actually record your voice onto when they view their document, electronically. You have to save it in the Screencast-O-Matic, and that's a good way for you to interact with them, so you're not just sending them a rubric. And one resource I tried to share in the Padlet, I'm not sure if it's saved, is teachertrainingvideos.com. And Russell Stoddard has created this, and he has very, very easy to follow tutorials on all things technology related, resources, tools you can use with your students teaching in an online platform. So I talked really quickly. That is some of the things I came up with. Now I'm going to flip it to Claire. Let me stop screen share.
Right. See if I can do mine. Okay. Slideshow. Okay. Can you see my slides? Anyone? Head nod? Yes. Okay, great. So I'm delighted to be talking with you today about how to think about how to make your instruction interactive in a lot of different ways. I wanted to take just a minute to talk about what active learning is. I think we all basically understand, but I think there's an important distinction to make between active learning, which I think of as the level of mental effort that students are putting into their learning. And the difference between that and active learning techniques, which I think are activities that teachers can use to help students engage in active learning. So I think the active learning part is kind of on the students. They have to exert the mental or intellectual effort, but we can help them get there by using strategies that promote more active learning. I think most activities can be more or less active. A lot of times I hear people say things like, well, I've got to do group work, or I've got to do problem solving or something like that. I don't think that's the case. I think we can have students be more or less active in whatever kind of activity we engage them in. For example, they can be active when listening to a lecture. Now that may not make me friends. I'll have some people that contest that point, and I get it, but there's a whole body of work on active listening. Active listening is a thing. And so I think personally that students can be active learners while listening to a lecture, or while solving a problem, or while discussing. And they can be less active on some activities like problem solving. For example, X+3=5. That is not really high levels of mental activity that you've got to use there to get to that point. So you can be less active or more active on whatever kind of activity or task you're trying to engage in. As my colleague Pat Cross says, and I think this is a great quote from her, passive learning is an oxymoron. There is no such thing. And I fully believe this. If students have learned, they have been active. And I think our job as teachers is to help them get to those higher levels of activity. So I wanted to give you 3 examples today of active learning strategies that I think you can use in all the different class formats that we have this semester. And there's so many this term. It's very different, as you know. We may be on site. We may have an online synchronous optional session for students to go to. We may be fully asynchronous online, or we may have students who are on site and other students who are online, zooming in simultaneously. So there's a lot going on and a lot to think through. So the first one, like I said, I argued that students can be active while listening to a lecture. And one way to help promote that is by using guided notes, which most of you are going to know. They're partially filled in notes or a set of questions that students can use while listening to a lecture. I have used these in asynchronous online courses when I have had students listen to videos in an asynchronous class. Basically, I just post the notes in the LMS. Students can download them and watch the video and listen along and fill in the notes while I'm talking. I think that helps them engage with the video. It helps them, it makes them not put it on 2 times fast, so I'm sounding like Mickey Mouse, right? Because they've got to go slow enough to take notes while they're listening. It helps them focus on what's the most important part of the talk. I have had them use them, just these are for you, but I have also had them where they submit the notes in an effort to show that they've filled them out. I have used these in synchronous classes where I'm doing Zoom lectures. And basically, I just drop a link to the notes into the chat. They download those notes and use them to follow along while I'm talking. I use them in professional webinars as well. So I think this is a great strategy. Again, it helps people stay focused while in a long talk. And I usually in long talks still use other active learning activities and then still use the notes so that they can follow the main points and keep up with them. In a socially distanced classroom, I think socially distanced classrooms can be really challenging to use active learning strategies, but this is one that I think is straight up easy peasy. If people are spread out all over the room and you're talking, that is one thing that they can use to stay engaged and active while you give a lecture to them. And then synchronously and on-site simultaneously. I've used those guided notes in that situation as well. And what I did was basically pass out notes to the students who were in the classroom with me and drop the link into the chat for students who were at a distance. And students complete the notes while the lecture is going on. Think, Pair, Share. That's one. I love Think, Pair, Share. I think it is a fabulous technique. Again, most of you know it's basically when students read or get some content through a lecture and you ask them to pause for a minute to think, to join with another student to discuss their ideas, and then to share out with the full classroom. It's a wonderful technique because it gives students a chance to prepare their ideas before engaging in a full class discussion. It also gives them a chance to explore more deeply and to formulate ideas in their own words, even if you don't go full class discussion. How do you do it online? That's really interesting. The best way that I have come up to do it this way is just through a straight up discussion board. And I'll just post upon a thread. Here's my question, here's my prompt, and I will suggest that students respond to one person, and then that person responds back, and then they switch roles. So basically, talk to another person in your class. I have not assigned the pairs. I just say, find a pair and post and then respond to at least each other at least once. And that seems to be about as close as I've come to capturing Think, Pair, Share online. In synchronous classes, I have put pairs into breakout groups where they go out into their rooms, discuss for a minute, then come back into the full class session. And what I have had them do is write their responses into a Google Doc while they are in the breakout room. And that prevents having to have each one of the pairs share out. I've done the pair share out in very small classes. If you have like 10 students, you can have one student report. If you have 20 students, it gets a little dicier. 30 students, even dicier still. So a Google Doc or a Padlet or something along those lines where they can capture their posts simultaneously, all working on the same document, I think is a great way to accomplish it. I think this is a hard one to do personally in a socially distanced classroom unless you have a very small group and a very big room. So if you have 8 students and you're in Graves Auditorium, you can probably go for it, right? But the rest of us may have a little more challenge with it. And in part, you know, I think about students having to try to talk loudly to each other, and then you get into COVID spread and stuff like that. I just don't know that that's something that I would want to do. If I had a big classroom, small group, I would just say, go ahead and think, pair, share the normal way. But if I had a bigger group who were not as spread out, what I would suggest is to do some kind of tech, again, like a Padlet or a chat or something along those lines, and have students just form pairs and share out. Sync online and on-site together. I did this last semester and it worked great, where I had students, basically one on-site student paired up with one online student. And I actually didn't tell them to do that. They just sorted to that sort of automatically. It worked very well. We did get a little bit of feedback on the audio right at first, but students switched to chat to talk to each other and just did private chats to each other. And then some students had headphones, so we kind of quickly resolved that issue, but it went very well. So that was a good situation for a Think, Pair, Share. It worked fine. One of my favorite things to do is at the end of every class session, I ask students, what's the most important thing that you learned today? Or in an online session, what's the most important thing that you learned in this module? This is a great technique for reflection and metacognition to help them think about what it is that they have learned. So in an asynchronous class, I've done it as just an assignment. What's the most important thing you learned in this module? Or I've done it as a short timed quiz where they had about 5 minutes in order to fill out the response. In synchronous online sessions, I have had students at the very end just do a quick chat, and that's a fabulous way to do it as well. It was very smooth, very seamless, and was a great way to close out the synchronous session. In a socially distanced classroom, I haven't done a socially distanced classroom yet, but if I were doing one, what I would do is go quickly around the room and ask the students to report out. And I would be sure to repeat whatever each student said so that other students could hear it, because I think it's going to be a little bit challenging for students to hear each other. And then sync and online together. I have done this as well. And what I've done is a round robin around the laptop first. So students on the Zoom kind of report out the first most important thing they've learned, and then a round robin around the classroom as well. So a couple of resources. These are just 3 techniques. There are hundreds of active learning techniques that you can do. There's several on the Patricia Cross Academy website. We have started posting those, how to do those online, so it's a good resource. I put it on our Padlet for this session as well. And then there's a wonderful document that Baumgartner, who is at LSU and Teacher Ed, I think, has posted 4 ways to do, there are dozens of techniques on her table and different ways to do it. Here's how you would do it on site. Here's how you would do it synchronous online. Here's how you would do it in a socially distanced classroom. So it's a great resource as well, and it is on Padlet. So that's basically what I have to say today, except for good luck to us all for fall. It's going to be an interesting and challenging time, but I think we can do some really creative stuff with our teaching. So thanks.
Thank you. And if you all have questions, what we'll do is if you would send those to me at ewilson@ua.edu. On our Padlet, there is a column for frequently asked questions. We'll curate those questions and respond. A lot of things are very fluid, so we want to take time to research and respond as best we can.